Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa Kshatriya. I'm proud to be a volunteer with the Canadian Centre for Men and Families, Alberta, and to host these monthly webinars with Charles Fair of Fair Legal on topics of concern to the population we aim to serve. That is, men struggling due to intimate relationship breakdown and turmoil who are facing legal challenges. And this time in particular, I'm pleased to uh, welcome my boss at CCMF, our executive director, Bill Fitzsimmons, because this month's topic is the Canadian Centre of Men and Families and how we support men. Charles has been volunteering his time for several years on these topics, and he's been practicing law for over 30 years and founded Fair Legal because he's passionate about helping others, ensuring that their rights are protected and that they are treated fairly. As always, please remember this is an educational offering. It is not legal advice. And there is a Q&A function in Zoom. If you have questions for Charles or Bill, please put them in and I'll read them out loud at the appropriate time. And if you're looking for additional supports for your mental health as you navigate your legal challenges, well, this is the perfect time to learn about all the different supports that we can offer you. So over to you, Charles and Bill.
Great. Thanks a lot, Vanessa. And it always is a pleasure. Oops. There we go. So it's always a pleasure to do these webinars for CCMF. There's a lot of it's really appreciated to see an organization that is filling, I think, a big gap in the services that are available to people caught up in the legal system. And this is a great opportunity to introduce Bill and interview him to some extent. What I'm thinking is that I'm hoping that there's other lawyers out there that will also see the value of getting CCMF involved in supporting their clients. And so it's just something in the back of my mind that hopefully with some education about what CCMF does and what Bill does, that would be very helpful. Catherine, do you want to throw up that first slide on what CCMF? So this is a slide that Bill prepared and about what's important for men to heal. And this, I think, Bill, this really seems to express the core values of CCMF. And I got to say, I was struck by how that is really a lot of what I think the clients of Fair Legal can experience or should be experiencing when they're working with us. And they should be experiencing that in any law firm. So if there's a lawyer out there listening to this thing, if this is the kind of firm that you have, this is a great partnership with CCMF. So there you go. So anyways, Bill, take it away. What is it that got you into CCMF in the first place? And tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, thanks, Charles. Maybe before I jump in, I'd just like to take a moment to express my appreciation first to Vanessa, who's been with CCMF Alberta longer than I have and has done an incredible job of helping with our legal program, co-hosting these webinars every month. So I appreciate that. I really appreciate Fair Legal, Catherine, and your other associates, and the work and support that you do, and the time commitment that you've given to CCMF and the men that we support. So thank you for that. Very much appreciated for all of you.
Oh, thank you.
So in terms of my background is kind of interesting. I had a long career in construction, mostly in the sales and marketing side of construction products. And then I took a not-for-profit master's degree with the express purpose of getting into the not-profit field. It took me a few years to do that on other than a volunteer basis. And how I got involved in CCMF was kind of a little bit interesting because it was my wife that actually sort of asked the question, why aren't there more supports for men, or what kind of supports are there for men? We're both Rotarians, and we're supporting a lot of women's and children's organizations and other services in the community, but nothing really for men. And she was curious as to what there was. So she started looking, and her first comment was, I'm not finding it. There's nothing out here for men to support men other than addiction services. But she kept digging, and she eventually came across CCMF. We got connected with my predecessor, Beth Barbary, and I did a few little projects for Beth from a marketing perspective, and we just kind of kept in contact. And she asked me a couple of times to take on this role, and eventually kind of came up with the right fit, and here I sit today. But what really got me into this work was two things. It was the statistic that 3 out of 4 suicides in Canada are men. Like, I got my attention. I had no idea that that was the statistic. And I reflected on my own personal life, not just my own experiences, but also the things I saw in my family and friends. And I realized that I had experienced a lot of the things or seen a lot of the things that our clients go through. And I realized I had a much more personal connection to this work than what I ever realized. And I stopped seeing it as sort of things that happened in my life or to people in my life, and realized it was part of a larger societal issue that wasn't being properly addressed.
So, do you want to talk a little bit more about what I've called the core values, what's important for men to heal,
Yeah.
and maybe talk about how CCMF delivers that?
Yeah, so I'll ask Catherine to bring that slide up again, but just to talk to the background of that slide, is a lot of what we're talking about is societal expectations, societal understanding of how men should behave and be, that's so deeply ingrained at an unconscious level that we're not always even really aware of those expectations of men. But what men often encounter in seeking help when they are struggling is uh, an assumption that they are at fault for what's happened to them, that somehow they must have been the agent. And to some degree, there's also an almost unstated, you're a man, you should be able to figure it out, help yourself, get on with it, tough it through, tough it out. So, there's some of those things in the background, but what really sets the table for a man to be able to move forward, heal, and be open to healing is a totally different thing, and that's compassionate, accepting, safe space, where he doesn't feel judged for the fact that he needs help and assistance, or judged by how he may have contributed to, the situation that he's going through. So those are really important aspects of creating the environment in which a man can begin to heal and feels comfortable. It's very easy to send a man back into his shell, and he'll sit there for years. The statistic is that men take approximately 2 years from the time they start looking for help to the time they actually engage with it. And some of that is due to the fact that they often are met by environments or situations or perspectives that are not accepting, they're not judgment free, and they're certainly not compassionate. So those are really key to what we try to create within CCMF. Other things that are important is coming to understand that their experience is not unique, that other men have gone through similar experiences, survived it, moved forward in their lives to lesser or greater degrees. And it's really important that they feel that they're actually being heard and understood. And one of the challenges that we have in our social services system, in the schools, in other environments, is men are underrepresented. They're underrepresented as teachers, as counselors, as uh, you know, social workers. So they're often encountering people who are well-meaning, but don't necessarily quite understand how men think. The other thing that's not on this slide that's an equally important point to bring up is men are also problem solvers by nature. So when they're looking for help, they're looking for compassion and understanding. Absolutely. They're looking for a safe space that they can share their feelings, and not, be judged, not, get backlash from it. I mean, men don't share these things in workspaces because they're competitive. They don't share it in the locker room because, they're likely to be the butt of the next joke. So, that safe space is really important. But when I say that men are problem solvers, once they've kind of expressed the emotions and feelings, they're also looking for tools, solid information, solid experiences from other people, direction on how they can move forward. They're typically not looking to spin and endlessly rehash their emotions and feelings. They want to express them, but they also want to get on with tackling the problem.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's having that emotional support helps, in my view, helps men. All of my clients, any client who has that emotional support, the support of whether it's peer support or counseling or whatever, helps clients make better decisions and helps to kind of ride through the ups and downs of litigation. I mean, lawyers can't guarantee results. I mean, that's a given. Any lawyer that says that they can guarantee results is not a good lawyer. And the reality is that sometimes we win a battle, sometimes we lose a battle. Hopefully, we're going to win the war, but that can be a real up and down process. And the more that clients can understand some of the complexities, the dynamics that are involved, and those insights that can come from support from CCMF, that's great. It certainly makes my job easier and gets to more effective results, I think. So there's another slide there about delivering how you deliver this stuff. I think maybe you've already.
yeah, and just to pick up on your comment, we try to provide the emotional outlet, emotional support, so that men are not using their lawyer as a counselor, so that when they're sitting with yourself or another lawyer talking about their legal situation, they're clear-headed enough to focus on that aspect, versus still in the midst of crisis. So that's where we hope the support that we offer complements the work you're doing in a legal perspective. So,
Yeah.
we've talked about compassion and belonging and understanding. Prioritizing community, men in survey after survey report very high levels of isolation. They feel isolated. They feel, especially when they go through intimate relationship breakdown, they feel very isolated. They're often cut off by family and friends who assume that they are at fault, whether in fact that's the case or not. Unfortunately, family and friends have a tendency to pick sides, and that's unfortunate. So it's really important to give people a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and connecting with others who understand what they're going through. And at the same time, we're trying to rebuild their agency. So equipping them not only to handle the stress and the life challenges that they're going through, but also break free. And often some of these high conflict relationship breakdowns are also featuring levels of very unhealthy codependency. So, we're trying to work with men for them to rediscover their agency and not recreate those codependent patterns in another relationship. And I can talk about some of the programs that are more specific about that. So, we're trying to equip men to, manage stressful situations in the future, as well as rebuild their life in the present circumstances. Most importantly, we want to minimize the chance that men's mental health is going to spiral downward and lead to a more severe crisis, because that's bad for themselves as individuals, it's bad for their families, it's bad for the community. So we know that the sooner that men get support and feel supported, the better off we are as a society. Um,
Yeah, I'm part of that agency. I'll throw in one of the other ways that I think CCMF can help. We've done some seminars. I think we did one on communication. How do you communicate effectively with somebody who's adverse? There's materials that are out there on the court's website and the Parenting After Separation course about communication, but you can't just take one course and get it. So, sometimes having the chance to talk it over with people and say, hey, you know what? If I start really following these principles of good, healthy communication, that's going to reduce the codependency, that reduce a lot of the emotional engagement. All of a sudden, people start seeing results, and that increases their agency. And again, I think that makes it easier for them to make good, healthy decisions from a legal perspective. And again, if we can just get the demonstrating that there's an effective change in, say, how communication patterns, well, then it's easier to get to a resolution, because the other side isn't going to be as oppositional to it. So, yeah, you've got various programs. Maybe you can talk about some of the programs you have. We've talked some of them. There's another slide here, I think you've got.
yes. Yeah, and we try to see our programs as kind of a holistic program where the different pieces kind of work together and support each other. So, it's not first on the slide, but the legal webinars and the legal referrals that we're working on with you at Fair Legal is really kind of that problem-solving aspect, if you will, that men are looking for. So many men have to self-represent in court because of the financial situation they're in and the relative costs. So webinars like this that provide, information on the different aspects of court, from, as you say, managing emotions to what's the paperwork, what's important to know about financial reporting, all those things and how they fit together. That's kind of some of that piece. We have we call them three buckets of support that kind of work together. So the first one is kind of the mental health support in recovery. Men's peer support groups, important part of that. It's often where men start out with CCMF, where they can meet weekly with men with similar experiences, men who have been through the process and are further along in their their life journey. They've recovered from the initial shock and trauma, and they're able to share their experiences and be the model of someone who has been able to specifically move through and come out the other side in one piece. That's an important thing for men to see when they're in the initial parts of crisis. I mentioned, understanding, patterns of codependency and understanding your trauma. Our Nexus Trauma Recovery group is a 13-week structured program, so it's different from the peer support. We actually take people through trauma, understanding first what trauma is, understanding your own trauma, recognizing your own trauma, and then the steps to go through to start rebuilding from that trauma. So that's an important program. We have psychologists, counselors on staff that provide counseling services. We provide a lot of low-cost counseling programs through the use of practitioners who are just starting their career, and we also have fully registered psychologists as well. So we're able to provide a sliding scale of fees that helps men again that are struggling financially, and we try to fit the fee schedule as much as we can to individual circumstances. But often the level of trauma and crisis that men have experienced is such that they do need that professional counseling support, maybe at certain points or maybe on a continuous basis. Buddy coaching is an interesting program because it's more future focused. So it's not mental health in the sense of counseling. What it is a process whereby you can set some goals for your life and have somebody help you be accountable for those goals and support you in that journey. And it's a very effective program that I don't think is as well utilized as it could be by many of our clients. Perhaps they don't entirely understand what it is, but it's really breaking down your objectives in life into manageable pieces and developing the plan and, supporting you, keeping you accountable for reaching those milestones. The third area that we operate in is parenting support. Many fathers who are going through separation and custody battles have some level of contact with their children, or they may have no level of contact with their children. But men in general are not expected to have high level parenting skills, and many men have a lack of confidence in their parenting skills, even though they've been parents for years. All of a sudden, they go through separation and divorce, and they their confidence in those skills is somewhat undermined. So our Fueling Fathers webinars that we do monthly just visit different aspects of parenting, everything from managing your emotions to cooking nutritious meals to inexpensive recreation options, managing your finances, everything that goes into being a good parent. We also offer the Triple P parenting program. And in fact, we're starting another session of that next week. And by the way, there's 2 spots open. So it's not too late if somebody wants to fill those last 2 spots. Triple P parenting is the positive parenting program. It's an internationally recognized standard of parenting support. And it's really designed to help parents understand setting boundaries, appropriate discipline, managing the family so that it's not chaos. Children don't thrive in chaos, and it's important to set boundaries for them. It's important to for them to understand that there are boundaries, there are expectations on their behavior. Children going through this as part of a family are also under considerable stress, undergone considerable trauma. So, it's really important that we support families both for the parents and particularly for the children themselves. And I think that's one of the unfortunate things about our system of family law, where we take what is fundamentally an adversarial system and apply it to families, where the last thing we need is adversarial approaches, because there's often already high levels of conflict, a lot of sense of blame and anger and all of those emotions that go along with it. So,
and how do you stay positive when all that's going on? Yeah, and keep positive for the sake of the kids. Yeah, very important.
Yeah, and just to finish up on this slide, we just recently opened the interim housing for men and children. I apologize, on the slide it says emergency shelter, but that's not what we are. We provide interim housing for men, typically men accompanied by children, although we will accommodate some single men when we have the opportunity and as our facility grows. But the idea is that often men are in a difficult situation. There's abuse. They need to get the children out of there, but they don't really have options for housing, or they've left with the children because they were in a dangerous situation that was putting the children at risk, and now they're essentially on the street. There are no facilities typically that accommodate men accompanied by children. There's a few women's shelters that have tried to do it on a limited basis, but it's a bit of a difficult thing for them to do because mixing a man into their population, which is often abused women, it can be re-traumatizing for the women. So, hats off to the women's shelters that have tried to support men in that way. But, we think having a dedicated facility for men where they can bring their children, otherwise the children are separated. So they don't have any loving parent accompanying if that happens if they're put into foster care or other institutional forms of care. So we think it's really important to provide that option for men and for their children.
Yeah, excellent.
So that's a lot of talking about CCMF, and I know
Yeah.
you and I, when we had our conversation a week ago, where we touched on a broad
Well,
array of topics related.
yeah, we did. And one of the issues you've talked about a little bit, this may lead to some of the frustration that men have, and that's this idea that, or feeling that the system is biased. And you've got um, some statistics about that. Um,
Yeah, if we bring up the
yeah,
slide, Catherine, on false allegations. Sorry, maybe we didn't call it that.
yeah, no, there's one.
Yeah, there is
There we
this is the
go.
one. Yeah, so you know, a lot of our clients feel disadvantaged in the court system. That's their perception. Whether it's entirely reality, it's certainly the perception. But I think one of the things that really, is foundational to why men feel the courts are against them is the issue of false allegations. This is data from a survey that we did of some of our men's peer support participants. Um, you'll notice that over three-quarters of them reported they had been falsely accused or charged with an offense that involved their spouse or their children. I mean, that's a very, very high number. Now, I've talked to other lawyers, and you can sort of say if this has been your experience as well, Charles, but I've had other lawyers tell me that they feel that at least 40% of accusations of violence or harm to the children are absolutely false and proven to be absolutely false. And there really is no, to our understanding anyway, there's no repercussions for people who bring false accusations to court. And it really puts men at a severe disadvantage, both in the court system and then, in their lives, both before and afterwards. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's an interesting issue because when you think about it, I think the problem is that when the female partner makes the accusation of abuse or whatever it is against the male partner, it's maybe more likely to be believed and get traction than when it's the reverse. And so there may be a feeling like, the this maybe go back to what you were saying before about how men are just sort of expected to just suck it up, and oftentimes, my clients will sometimes describe being physically assaulted by their partner, and just basically having to, just simply take it because they know that if they do anything in retaliation or anything aggressive, they're going to be the ones that are going to be at fault. I was talking to a client recently, and it was interesting because he had an experience that he had two experiences that kind of uh, uh, changed his perception a little bit, and one of them was he was in an area of outside of Calgary, and he called 911, and the call was routed into the Calgary 911 center. And when he heard that, he hung up, and he got a call back right away. And the dispatcher, um, asked him almost right away if he was safe. And he said, that was a real change for him, because in his perception, because he just figured that, well, he's a male caller, are they going to be thinking about whether he's safe or not? So that was an interesting. The other one that was interesting, we were going through a mediation process, and another client was saying that he was pleased that the mediator didn't seem to have that bias. And this is a mediator with considerable experience in family law and doing mediation for quite some time, and we're at least 20 years of experience. And so when you got a mediator who's a lawyer, who's oftentimes when we're trying to negotiate solutions, we're doing that in what we call the shadow of the law. So if a mediator is helping the parties see to a reasonably fair resolution that involves both parents being actively involved with their children, et cetera, then that perception of bias just isn't there. The other thing that I wonder about, and this is because I don't see the bias as much as the statistics suggest that it's out there in terms of people's perception. And I think that's because if the man goes all the way through to a trial, he maybe is as likely as he maybe has a better than even chance of being successful. And I wonder whether guys are just dropping out because they believe that the system is biased, and therefore they don't press on. And that might be because of resources or whatever, or they're feeling that bias is there. They say, why would I spend all of these resources if the result is going to be predetermined because of the bias? And what I'm saying, that's not really my experience. I think if you show up, even if you've already had a case where you've been cut out and given an initial guardianship application was denied, if you keep showing up, eventually the courts say, my God, this father is showing up for his kids. And that's ultimately what the test is, I think, of whether somebody should have custody or even shared custody of the kid, is, are you willing to show up and take responsibility? Because parenting is about responsibility as much as it's about rights. And so you're willing to take that responsibility and keep demonstrating it. And that part of that is just hanging in there. So, it's an interesting thing. And one of the things that I like about CCMF is it doesn't view the problems that men are facing as the fault of women, right? Or the fault of, yes, the bias, the feeling of bias is there, but it doesn't, it's not I say it's not one of these rabid organizations that, with all of the negative press that kind of organization can get. It's say, hey, let's focus on men and what they can do. And I can say, look, you want to deal with bias? Keep at it, right? Act like a responsible parent. Learn what responsible parenting is. Take that responsibility, and the courts will respect that. So
Yeah, I think
so that's
I think
my
you're
approach.
true. I think some of what you're saying is true, Charles. And at the same time, I know that many of our clients have a different experience
Yeah,
in the court system. And I'll mention a couple of things that come to mind. One is that the societal view, and again, a lot of these things are very unconscious. So, people who operate in the court system are human beings that are part of our society and have the same societal frameworks and biases that we all have. Um, Women do not get criticized in court for being too emotional. Men do. Yet, on the one hand, we're expecting men to be more human, more emotional, and show up in a healthy emotional way for their children, but we're not allowed to express how deeply wounded we are by not having access to our children. That's a deeply biased viewpoint that we encounter in the courts more than
well,
occasionally. So there are those things that are so deeply unconscious in our the way we look at men and expect men to show up that it really disadvantages them in ways that we don't necessarily fully appreciate.
Oh, sure. And then of course the criticism of men is that they don't show emotions. So they say, okay, well, I better show emotions so that I show that I at least have some kind of emotional, intelligence or something. I better show emotion. The question is how much. I was counseling a mom, and I thought every time I was talking to her about this situation, this she just was falling apart in tears. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to put her on the stand, and she's going to be so emotional that she's going to lose credibility. So I put her on the stand, and remarkably, she had what I thought was just the right amount of emotion. And so this is really the trick. Is the problem is yeah, it's true. You might get criticized for being too emotional, but the real problem is if you're too emotional, it raises a question of whether you are lacking in emotional regulation. If you can't control yourself in a courtroom situation, especially if you're man, and that may be where the bias comes in, how are you going to be when you've got a problem with your children or with your spouse, and now you're using this emotional outburst, or you're crying or upset or angry or whatever as a way of expressing a natural emotion, but you may need to like step out of it and say, okay, what are the lessons I need to learn from, say, the positive parenting stuff, positive effective communication? How can I communicate effectively without using emotion as manipulation? All of that's the kind of skill set that I think that if men are getting help with, then they'll start to feel like they're getting a different result in court. So
Well, I mean, we counsel our clients, when we can, to be unreasonably reasonable um,
yeah.
in the courts. But that's an easy thing for me to say um, when I'm not the guy who hasn't seen his children for 2 years and has been rebuffed at every opportunity, or he's had court orders that he should be seeing his children and they're being ignored. And I think one of the things that makes some of our clients feel a sense of bias is that often they're in a financial situation where they're self-representing because they don't have the resources to hire a lawyer on a full-time basis, and yet it seems like very often they're facing a spouse in court who has all kinds of legal resources and representation available to them, and that's a very frustrating thing for a lot of these men, and they start to feel like they're a victim in this court system. Uh,
Yeah,
so I understand that.
there might be something to that, because when you think about what the income level is for legal aid, for example, right? It may be that it is set at an amount that women are more likely to qualify for if there is a wage gap, and that's a whole other question. If there is there a wage gap between men and women? If there is, and the legal aid level is set in between those two levels, or I probably didn't say that right. They say lawyers can't do math, but the point is that then that might create a systemic bias that might be worth looking at. I don't know, right? Um, Certainly, the legal aid system leaves some women without effective representation as well, because their income may be too high. And I can say that if somebody's making, I don't know, let's say $75,000 a year, they're not going to qualify for legal aid, and that legal services are really expensive, and that's really hard to handle on a $75,000 a year income. Just saying, right?
Yeah,
That's
when you're
and
paying child support, trying to
right.
support two households. So
Right.
There's an
Yep.
interesting development at the University of Calgary. The Law Foundation of Alberta has given them a large multi-year grant for the departments of law and social work to actually work together on coming up with alternatives to family court and the adversarial court system in favor of other forms of settling, family breakdown. I think that's a really positive development that there's not only an understanding that we need to, look at how the court can function differently, but also, the legal, the Law Foundation, stepping up in a big way with significant funding to look at doing things differently. So I mean, I think that's a promising, future alternative to, some of the things that we're doing currently. I did want to circle back to your comment about women, because I think it's important that we make the point at CCMF, we're not against, for example, the women's movement and objectives around equal opportunities and equal pay for work of equal value. We're really here waving our hand and saying, this is all great stuff and we totally support it. But 3 out of 4 suicides in Canada are men, and boys are falling behind on a whole range of measures. So we just think as a society we have to rebalance a little bit and make sure men and boys are being supported as well, and that fathers are valued in our society and seen um, as important to the health of their children and the wellness of their families. So yeah, it's not an anti-female. And, I mean, I hear stories all the time of things that an individual woman has done to one of our clients, and of course, it's coming from our clients, and it's a narrow perspective. So if I was working for a women's organization and constantly seeing women, who come in or victims of abuse, I'd probably get pretty jaded about men as well, right? So you really have to constantly check yourself at the door and
Yeah.
and realize that women are not the enemy, men are not the enemy. At the end of the day, we're all human beings together, and we've got to find
Yeah.
better ways to build our communities strong and healthy.
That's actually why I represent both men and women, right? I view the role of the legal profession and the justice system as a whole. So it's what we're really trying to do is regulate people's behavior. As human beings, we're social creatures, and we we have expectations about how we want people to behave, and that goes to male and female. And so I represent both men and women because I that's how you understand what those things are. The other thing I was going to say is um, when somebody's facing frustration about what's going on, is I think it's important to really try to understand where the other side is coming from. And this can be really hard, because how do you know that old saying, seek first to understand before being understood. And you go see your lawyer, and the lawyer's saying, okay, so tell me what you think the other side might be thinking here. And you're going, what? I thought you were on my side. Let me assure you, I am on your side. But this is partly how we get there, is we got to understand what's going on. Because if we don't understand, then it's harder to really address it and get to a resolution. And what's the best resolution? That you've got, mothers and fathers and their children, and they are raising healthy children, and they are demonstrating to their children that they are able to engage in healthy relationships with adults, right? Whether that's the biological parent, the other biological parent of those children, or a new partner, and everybody's able to relate well. And the justice system is supposed to be helping people ultimately get there. I know it's adversarial, but I think that really is the goal. And there's some judges who are very, in front of one judge who practiced family law for 30 years. And then, now she's on the bench and she's seeing the children of the dysfunctional families that she was involved with early on in her career as a lawyer coming through in the criminal youth justice system where she sits as a judge. She can't hear those cases, obviously, but she's saying, and so she's admonishing clients constantly, you guys don't figure this out. And she's not targeting that message to the men or the women. She's saying to these parents, if you guys don't figure this out, your kids are going to end up in front of me in the criminal youth justice system. So figure this stuff out. The high conflict is not doing your kids any good. And I keep thinking, there's always something that you can do that doesn't depend on the other side. Coming up with a list of everything that the other person is doing wrong doesn't help you figure out what you can do differently, right?
Well, you bring up an important point. There is such a strong aspect of intergenerational trauma involved in the high conflict relationship situations that we see. One or the other parties, or sometimes both. So it's really important, like you say, that we get it right. I will say that we do see situations where parents have gone from high conflict relationship breakdowns to the point of really positive co-parenting situations where, those co-parents will actually say to one another, like, I really like where our relationship has got to, as separate, individuals that are living separately, but still raising our family together. So I think it's an important point to remember that it does happen. People can get through this, create a more positive relationship that supports their children. Not
I
always,
wanted to
unfortunately.
let's throw up your last slide there, parenting arrangement. You want to throw that one up, Catherine?
One moment, please.
This is kind of, sorry, Charles, this is kind of interesting data, again, from our survey of men's peer support. So 44% of the men reported that they see their children pretty much in accordance with the arrangements and orders. Of course, we don't know what those orders are, whether our bias is that equal shared co-parenting should be the default model, and then adjusted only when it's clear that that's not appropriate. So it was interesting to see that 44% experienced consistency with the orders. 14% actually reported that they saw their children more than the legal agreement called for. So that's kind of a positive statistics. But a third of them said that they consistently see their children less than the arranged and agreed orders. And again, I think that's one of those aspects that comes back in that, feeling that the court system is not serving them well. And then there was one individual that didn't have any contact with his children in this survey. And unfortunately, we do see a lot of men who, have been completely cut off from their children. And it's heartbreaking to talk to them, because I don't think our society truly appreciates how deeply wounding it is for, a loving father to not have any contact with his children.
Yeah, and of course, and the impact on those children as well. That's
Absolutely.
the statistics are interesting because, of course, we don't know whether these results are as a result of, say, effective enforcement or effective or ineffective enforcement, or what. And when you see a statistic that says that men are seeing the children less, is that because of enforcement, or is that because they're not acting properly, right? They haven't quite got through the triple P parenting program yet, right? It's like, and so the statistics may not you can kind of use them to support anything you want in some ways. I'm not being critical of the statistics because
No,
I think
and
it
it's
really is interesting. And I think the statistics, from my perspective, I'm thinking, well, 14% is consistently seeing children more than the arrangement. That says to me that we're making a difference in the sense, because that's what we want, right? Because that says the conflict has reduced to the point where the kids are seeing, I remember years ago, early on in my career, I had one where my guy had criminal convictions. I don't think I could pull this off today. My guy had criminal convictions against him for assaulting not just the mother of his child, but also for a woman that he met in a psych ward. We did a trial and I got him every other weekend unsupervised. As I said, I'm not sure that I could pull that one off today, given that fact scenario. But a few months later, he said to me, everybody's calmed down. And he's seeing the kids more than the kid was, that everybody, the extended family, this is in a small town in Ontario, everybody would calm down and he was seeing the kid more than the court had ordered. I go, and I think that's partly, I don't know, not to toot my own horn on this one, but when I approach litigation, I say, you know what, everybody is entitled to respect. I'm not going to be there bashing the other party, right? I treated the mother of his child with respect in that process, and look at the result. I'm looking at the time here. We're 7:53. I know there may be questions. I don't know, Vanessa, if there's any questions that
There
Bill and
are,
I can answer.
oh yes, there are many questions. Uh,
Okay.
well, first of all, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Better than before.
Good. I fixed the problem. Thank you.
Okay.
And I need to know, gentlemen, if you're willing to go a little long. I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew you would be, Bill, and I know you always are.
Hey,
Charles-
Catherine here for a moment. So the algorithm is not going to let us go any farther. So I'm going to end the show here and then we can take questions. How about we do that?
What does that mean, end the show?
The gentlemen are going to go through the last 3 slides and then we'll close the show, turn off the recording, and then we'll answer questions if that's all right with everyone.
So
So nobody has to.
the attendees won't drop out?
Nope, everybody can stay who would like to stay.
All right.
So
Alrighty.
what I'll do is just drop your slides on, Charles. Here we go.
So it looks like different ways to connect with CCMF, and I always recommend going to the website because not only is there complete descriptions of our programs, but for those that are looking for some assistance, if you click on the Need Help button, that will take you to a form that feeds electronically into our intake program. And although it is a computer-based situation, you actually get to talk to a person much quicker than any other forms of attempting to communicate with us.
And yeah, we've got resources there for fair legal. I very rarely look at them, so I assume they're great.
I haven't even turned it on full. Sorry, there's all your animation. And next month, same day, only 28 days in February.
Yeah, second Thursday. Yeah, good.
All right, we're going to end the show here, but stick around if you have questions. I'll put the recording back on, but we'll end the official show at this moment. Thank you, everyone.
Catherine?
Yeah,